Shalom, greetings everyone. It is your brother Leon the Servant back with another video. The state of the hair. We have a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about. All right. Typically, the common perception of hair has little to no importance. For we say, hey, whatever looks nice, whatever goes with your mood, that's what you wear. Little thought goes after that, right? Of the importance of what that hair states, right? We have some movements now which is trying to bring more of an Afro awareness of our hair, and you have certain things of that sort coming to play, but not really on a huge scale. I wanted to talk about hair of the past, right, and how that had deep roots to our culture and how we proceeded through life and what that meant. We can look as close back into the late 60s and early 70s, where the Black Panthers and them wearing afros as a unifying force, and also to start to express of their own natural roots. Right? We have we can look at slavery, right? Even though it's something that's a sensitive topic, during that time, certain hairstyles was to use to unite other slaves, as in the factor of when to leave or when it's time to run and what direction to go. Right? We have in African tribes currently and in the past of using certain breeding styles, currently and well known as cornrows, to exhibit status, right? And the list goes on, right? We have in the Bible Samson and his long locks of hair. We have Samuel with his long locks of hair, right? Uh, and so on and so forth, right? There's a lot. The history of hair is deep and rich, as it should be. And we place little importance to this, but as a temple of the Most High, as children of the Most High, we should look into the importance of the things that He put in us and on us, right? So let's go. Let's let's start with just some of the history, and then we could dive into some of the spiritual implications and relevance of hair, right? So I touched on the Black Panthers, right? When the Black Panthers united and started forming their party and eventually adopted the Afro, right? That statement that it made in society was that, hey, this is how our hair is, this is how our hair grows, and we're going to wear it that way. And it's no longer going to be considered unprofessional or unclean or what have you. And for people who are not aware, it's kind of similar on today. Well, I'll say back like 3 years or so. What's in the aspect of is your hair is not clean cut and shaven, then you're unprofessional. Or in short, it's unprofessional. It's very similar to the military standards, right? But the thing is that doesn't necessarily agree with our culture. It doesn't agree with how we express our own hair, right? And without making this a whole you versus them type of ordeal, I want to express how during the Black Panthers they polarized the Afro to the point of it was seen rebellious, right? Same thing with dreadlocks. Is dreadlocks got the name because when they saw on warriors, it was dreadful. They saw and it captivated and it embodied courage and might of the enemy, and that's why it was dreadful, right? So our hair has been used to polarize and has been used to inseminate certain ideas, right? Currently, in society, and for the most part, wearing dreadlocks, wearing certain braids and cornrows and things of that sort is not considered professional by business means, by school means, and some aspects. You have athletes who, um, I'll see if I can find the picture, but an athlete had to cut his locks off, or his, yeah, I think it was his dreads, cut his dreads off because of the fact that the referee found it unprofessional, and it was more like a hazing type of situation. What it seemed like, in the aspect that in order to wrestle, right, and he wound up winning the match, he had to cut off his locks, right. I recently finished watching the Kaepernick docuseries on the same similar situation, right? When he had baseball with his coach, and his coach told him to cut it, and he had this whole disagreement with his father, or his adoptive father, on his hair, and he wound up making him cut it, and he felt humiliated, right? So that's a common situation, a common trend, and I want to elaborate on that in further detail. All right, I've mentioned some other things real quick, so let me address them real quick before I just put the things in the link in the description box and put the links to them so you can read them yourself, which was about the slaves and about them using certain hairstyles and whatnot to signal certain movements that was going to be made on the plantation. I found that very interesting, as hair seems to be a very versatile way of communication. They say that 70% of all communication is through body language, right? Through appearance, right? Through your aggressions and microaggressions and your small interactions. And they use something as some dismissible as hair to talk and to communicate something that they didn't have to say about words, which is very interesting, right? And let's get into this whole hair situation and growing it out. What does the Bible say about the hair, right? So we're gonna go and look at let's go look at Numbers first, right? And this is the Nazarite Vow, right? Numbers 6:1 through 21, and it speaks about this vow that was made. This is the same vow that Samson was under, and where he attributed his strength to, right? And it talks about how no razor to touch the crown of your head, right? And also we could look back in Leviticus, right? And there's some strange commands or charges that's in the Bible, talking about Leviticus 19:27, where it says, "Yea, shall not return round the corners of your heads, neither shall thou mar the corners of thy beard," right? And you also have Leviticus 21:5, where it says this: "They shall not make baldness upon their head, neither shall they shave off the corner of their beard, or nor make any cuttings in their flesh," right? So where are these coming from? What is the implications and importance of this? Well, similar onto Buddhist monks today, right, where they shave off all their head, and they do this in the means of saying that they use it to rid themselves of want, right, of desire, right. So then that's the way, and they dedicate that same very hair to temples, and in those temples they're not burnt as it follows in the Numbers, right? But a lot of times they are sold to marketplaces, and in these marketplaces they will make wigs and weaves out of this, right? And then sell it to other people, right? And it's very popular in my nation to wear these wigs and weaves that are spiritually charged. And how are they spiritually charged, you may ask? Well, if, for instance, I'm growing out my hair, right? And I'm doing this for a spiritual reason, and I said, okay, now it's time to cut this hair, right? Whatever spiritual intent that I had in carrying and letting the length of my hair grow, that same spiritual intent is left in the hair. Now you put that same hair into or onto another person, right? Your hair is connected directly to your head, right? It grows out, right? So now, not by any stretch of the imagination, you put on some type of spiritual hair, right? And it has intent. We've already seen what spiritual intent can do at a concert, right? Now you put on the same hair, and now you wonder why when women get their hair done, right, with the weave in, they kind of act a little different. They have like a spirit on them or over them, right? It's very interesting. It's very interesting how that proceeds, right? You don't take something by its origin that was made for something and try to change it. And what I mean by that is that if this was a dedication to Buddha or Buddhist or whatever following of religion, you don't try to take that and put that into your life and not think that some aspect or some effect does not affect you from incorporating that, right? So it was back in those days, back in days of antiquity, guys would shave off the corners of their head, right? Kind of like a little fade, it seems like, from what I'm understanding from these what these scriptures are saying. And that was a way to show dedication unto their God. That was a way to say, hey, this is the God that I serve. So, in direct contrast, the Most High said, don't do such things. Now, he's not saying we can't cut our hair, not saying that we can't cut our beard, but there was certain ways that they connotated to serve that God, right? And that's something else to keep in mind. The Most High wants us to have hair, right, on our face and on our head. For men and for women, it would just be on your head, right? Um, with that being said, let's dive into the spiritual ramifications and the outlook of when someone cuts off their hair, because it said in um, Leviticus 21:5, not to make baldness upon their head, right? So let's look at that real quick in Jeremiah 7:29. And before I dive in, hair was is also considered a state of your being, right? In the aspect of, hey, you have nice long full hair, shows that you're nice and healthy, right? It shows that you're in a good state. For if not, right, if you were just trying to survive or trying to survive, you wouldn't have time or you wouldn't have the resources to take care of your hair. So now let's look at this, right? Jeremiah 7:29. It says, cut off thy hair, O Jerusalem, and cast it away, and take up limitation on high places, for the Lord has rejected and forsaken the generation of his wrath. Right? So, in that verse right there, we have cutting off your hair, right, as a way to lament, right? To be depressed or show sorrow, right? And let's keep reading. There's more than one example of this. And Micah 1:16, it says this: make thee bald, and poll thee for thy delicate children. Enlarge thy baldness as the eagle, for they are gone into captivity from thee. Once again, is used as a similitude of sorrow. Right? It is to show great distress. Right? And along with this, they probably put on clothes of sackcloth, which is very itchy clothing, and a process of lamenting. So when we look back at Leviticus and it tells us not to do those things, right? Not to make baldness upon our head, that's because we're not supposed to put ourselves in this sorrowful state, right? But this charge was given in Jeremiah and Micah because of the things that was happening unto Jerusalem to seek some type of salvation from the Most High, right? Now, let's look at a curse that was given on to the daughters of Zion, right? About baldness, right? And this ties into what I was saying earlier about the whole Buddhism and the Buddhist temples, right? Therefore, the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts, right? Now, this is found in Isaiah 3:17, and you can see that this is um, an ordeal that was given to the daughters of Zion, right? And if we found out that being bald was a process of lamenting, then this is a curse given unto the daughters of Zion, right? I want to explore one more topic, one more aspect of cutting one's hair, right? And it's also a process of rebirth and renewal of thyself physically, right? This is, I would say, similar onto being baptized in a sense, right? Now let's look at Deuteronomy 21:10-14, where it says this: when thou goest forth to war against thy enemies, and the Lord thy God hath delivered them into thy hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and seest among thy captives a beautiful woman, and have a desire unto her, and thou wouldst have her to be thy wife, right? That thou shalt bring her home to thy house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall put the raiment of her captivity from off of her, and shall remain in thy house, and bewail her father and her mother a full month, and after that thou shalt go into on her, right? And so on and so forth, right? But what's important is that it says that she has to shave her head. It's a way of denouncing, right? A way of putting all those things in the past, right? It's very interesting when you see women going through like a personally very tumultuous time that they cut their hair off. They cut their glory, right? And they go real short. They look very boyish, right? And a lot of them be like, well, this is my statement, this is my movement, but you can see that there's a spirit on them that they're trying to change something, right? Um, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting how hair seems deeply connected into us, right? So much to the factor that it can even change your mental state, right? And I want to go to a study that was done on Native Americans when they was drafted or volunteered for the Vietnam War, because there was some that volunteered and some that was drafted. Right? Remember this. For the Vietnam War, how when they cut their hair off, they lost a sense of their ability to navigate. Alright? So the phenomenon was this, right? When they had their long hair, they seemed very good at escaping enemies. They was able to kind of like sense it. It was like a sixth or seventh sense for them. They always avoid capture, and this was in simulations, but also in actual war, right? And then when they had them cut off to simulate them into being into the army, they seem to have lost this ability, and they often was captured, and they was also often killed. And this was a paradox and a paradigm that was weird. And the only thing that changed these men was the fact that their hair was cut, right? Now I want to talk more about this, right? I want to talk about hazing, right? And I want to talk about denouncing once again. See, your hair kind of like carries history to a certain extent. And what I mean by that is that your DNA, right, the blood that flows, that helps build your hair is expressed through your hair, right? And whatever you've been going through, sometimes that's why people just cut off their hair to start anew, start fresh, start a new look, they will say, right? But let's look at hazing and how that works, right? So it's very interesting that the military, in order to join, men must cut their hair off, all gone, bald. And during this process, it puts them in a state of shame to some degree. And if not, then the next acts that follow, which is them being in underwear in certain instances, and just being yelled at and berated by some man, constantly, being wet or what have you, whatever else things that they do in the military. Some of this is speculation, and the rest is only what I've seen and researched, right? Not to disrespect the military, but it's interesting that one of the processes in this and breaking you in boot camp, which is what it's meant to do, is meant to have you conform to the new standards, to the new rule, is that they cut your hair, right? And it's also very interesting that they make sure you have a cut beard, right? It's considered unprofessional. These things that in the Bible shows a certain state of good, of wealth, of status, right? And charges that we are to keep, not to destroy our beard, right? Which some could interpret that however you want. Some could say that you're not supposed to shave it at all. Some could say that you can't line it up. However you want to interpret that, that's all up to you. I'm not here to personally be the one that deliberates and tells you exactly how you're supposed to wear it. I'm just trying to show the implications of spiritual and physical that it has, right? So, with that being said, it's very interesting on clean cut is not having a beard, and it's but it's having a beard is a very masculine trait, right? And they say, well, having long hair, that's very feminine. Well, it depends on what your definition of long is, right? Some would say that my hair is way too long, right? And others would say it's fairly short. What standards are you going by, right? And there are Bible verses that talk about having a long hair for a man and what have you, this and that. And to address that, right, what happens if you take a Nazarite vow for life? Right? Then it's no longer considered feminine, I would suppose, right? What happens if that was something like Samuel, right? He had very, very long locks. So there seems to be an understanding that there's a correct time and place for both, right? Um, and that's what it was. Just a real quick video about long or having locks or having hair, the state of hair, and the importance that it could have. Um, a lot of the things of our human body is a lot more integrated than we like to perceive and like to act as if. Um, with that being said, shalom and peace.